Mental toughness is being able to say yes to the challenges, the difficulty, and make wise choices. Always look at, okay, how did I choose? And then when you make mistakes, you can learn from it. But you're going to make mistakes. We learn trial and error. A success is 99% failure. Success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So every day you can succeed. Every day, 1% better, 1% better. That's all you need to do. And then at some point, it's gonna take off.
Today, you're going to meet somebody who's trained at the highest level, not just physically, but mentally. And this individual has worked with the likes of people like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Phil Jackson, Tim Grover. The list goes on from that perspective, but from Yale to jail, written multiple books, an athlete himself, has helped thousands of people around the world figure out what it means to be present and operate from truly a place of intrinsic motivation. I'm so hyped to introduce author, athlete, and a level of inspiration himself, Mr. George Mumford. How are you today, sir?
Jonathan, pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you.
Likewise. So, I think an optimal place to start, just based on your background, based on your insight, is how do you define insight?
That's interesting. And how do I define insight? Insight is like you get an insight. I you can refer to it as wisdom or understanding, but insight is getting a clear view of the way things are. So I describe it. And so sometimes I use the words, like wisdom and insight interchangeably. And so it has to do with information. It could be just raw information, intellect, and also it includes intuition or second sight.
I love that definition because when I came across it in your book, I was like, that's probably the most profound definition of insight that I've ever heard. I think we hear a lot of people talk about, oh, this person's insightful, but what does that really mean? It really just sounds like they got some value to add to a conversation. But you talk about it as like this crossover between your intuition and your intellect and the discernment in between the two. How did you start thinking about presence and mindfulness in the way that you do to help cultivate your insight?
Yes, thank you for asking me. Well, it's because in my own experience of wanting to live life fully and creatively, you have to have clear vision. You have to be able to see things clearly. And when you see things clearly, then everything else follows that. So when you have right understanding or right view, that means you're viewing things correctly. You're viewing things as they are. So when you have right view, you're going to have right speech. You're going to have right action. You're going to have right livelihood. You're going to have right mindfulness, right effort, right concentration. And then that it's just that clear. When your mind is clear, everything else is clear. You see clearly, you behave clearly, you think clearly. Your beliefs are clearly about the moment. And when you see the moment, then your thoughts, your words, your actions, your habits, your values, your destiny. That's what Gandhi talks about. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. So if you are interested in, having a certain destiny or being able to live in the moment as it is, and when you do that, you're going to be able to perform, you're going to be able to enjoy it more or understanding what it is. So without the understanding, without being able to see clearly, then you feel more confident and you actually can relate to the situation in the most effective, convenient way.
When it comes to transformation, what do you think that first step is? For me, I know when I teach seminars when it comes to stress management and cultivating resilience, I start with vision. You just talked about vision for a while. Where do you think transformation starts?
Well, transformation is, well, let's put it in simplistic terms and let's talk about the caterpillar. For the caterpillar is in the chrysalis. And so the caterpillar gets in the chrysalis, and its task in the chrysalis is to break out, is to chip away to break out. And in the process of struggling to break out, it develops the strength and the ability to fly. to transform. So that's transformation. You go from caterpillar to butterfly. And so as human beings, we get to transform. Maybe not that, explicitly, but there's a transformation of the body, the mind, the heart, the soul, spirit, whatever. And so transformation means that you are transforming or you are evolving so that you don't become extinct. It's really simple. If you snooze, you lose. Things change, we have to change. And as we change, you go with the rhythm. Bruce Lee talked about be like water. So you have to be like water. You got to go with the flow.
When I've heard you talk about presence and flow, it's a key pillar in mindfulness. It's a key pillar in transformation and vision. How do you define presence?
Yeah, presence is yes. Presence is being present. I don't know if I can say more about that. The more present you are, the more your presence is felt. And your presence is not just being present, but being present with a certain energy, with a certain spirit. And so the idea is when you have presence, people know you're there. They can feel you. They can experience you because there's not these walls or anything. There's an openness. There's a authenticity. It comes with just being present, being as you are. So it's not so much doing as being. So you can feel somebody's presence. And usually that presence is a reflection of your ability to be in a moment. Because the reality of the situation is the only time we have is now. Everything life is lived in the present. That's it. And so if I'm thinking about yesterday or tomorrow, then I'm not here. And you can feel that. You can see the absence. It's like, hello, there's nobody home because my mind is everywhere other than where it needs to be right here. And so presence, we could talk about that, but it's really about living fully and creatively self-expressed in the here and now. And so sometimes your expression is just to listen. A big part of love, big part of being present is being open and listening to whatever is being offered without an agenda, without a judgment, but just allowing whatever's there to express itself in its own language. That's what mindfulness is about. It's about seeing things in clearly as they are now, not as they were based on our past experience or having thoughts and ideas coming in and cluttering the space instead of letting the raw data express itself as it is in its own language.
When people say they don't have time for any of this mindfulness or presence or love, as someone referred to it, how would you respond to something like that?
So when you say it takes time, it takes effort. Yes, it does. But is it worth it? Yes. Is it worth it? Because that's when you feel fully alive. That's when you feel like you can be yourself. You can feel like that's when you feel connected to something greater than yourself, beyond yourself. What stops us from being present? What is concerned about being aware? See, because the interesting thing is, if you are aware, then you have to be responsible. So we're not just talking about being here. So if I'm here and I got a bad attitude, or if I got frustration, or I got anger, or resentment, or any of those emotions here, that's going to impact our ability to communicate. That's going to impact how you feel in terms of whether you feel safe or you feel connected or you feel like there's a distance and there's walls up and stuff like that. So it takes something, to be present, to listen, it takes something. It takes effort. And the only way you can do that is through love. You love what you labor for and you labor for what you love. So it takes effort to be present. It takes effort to listen, not just to you, but to myself. To get with yourself, be still and know. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? How are you behaving? I am responsible. So that's what it comes down to. This ability to have the discipline to be responsible. So if I see something, then I have to be responsible for it. Most people don't want that responsibility because you can think about it as in terms of the way Soren, Soren Kierkegaard talked about it. He talks about this idea of freedom and potential as being one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is anxiety, uncertainty. And so you can't have one without the other. And he actually referred to it as the alarming possibility of being able. So let me repeat that, the alarming possibility of being able, because it takes something and you have to say yes to the anxiety, the uncertainty, because each unknown unfolding moment is just that, unknown. We have no idea what's going to unfold. But if we can have this ability to create space between stimulus and response, then we get the freedom and power to choose. But we are responsible. So when we make wrong choices or make choices, we all have to own it. And most people don't want that burden of the freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. And so a lot of people say, "Oh, they want to be mindful. They better be in the moment." No, not really. If you listen to them, they do the B and D. What's the B and D? Blame and denial. It's never them. But to be responsible, to say to yourself, "I can't control what happens to me, but I can choose my response to what happens to me." That's the ultimate freedom. Viktor Frankl talked about unavoidable suffering, saying yes to life in spite of anything else. That's the first task, is to say yes to life, to have that mirror mind, that awareness. I refer to it as the 4 A's, the awareness. And sometimes we're not aware because we don't accept what's happening. We don't want to take responsibility. But the first A is awareness. Mirror mind is not, it doesn't discriminate, it just reflects what's there. And then from the mirror mind, you have the acceptance. Can you accept it? I've been, you can see this, I've been experiencing shingles for the last 12, 13 days. It's very uncomfortable. So being able to say yes to that and say, okay, acceptance, the shingles, and then accepting it. Accepting it means taking it, the pain, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, saying yes to it. And by saying yes to it, in spite of the difficulty, the unpleasantness, the discomfort, then once I say yes to it, now I have the third A, which is the compassionate action. I can do something about it. And then the fourth A is assessment. What worked, what didn't work? How do you get what didn't work to work? So this is the thing. Like, you gotta say yes to whatever comes up and be present for it. And it's easy to be present when, oh, you just won a Super Bowl, or you feel good and you feel happy, or you just celebrated a success or a victory. See, it's easier on some level. On some level, for some of us, it's not. It's more challenging to say yes to life because we may not have a view that says we're worthy of it. So it's very complicated depending on our situation. But being able to say yes to whatever comes up and be fully present for it, that's the challenge. And the challenge is, especially when it's uncomfortable. So as human beings, we could program ourselves. We could train ourselves to say yes to everything.
I first came across your work. I already said it to you, but I'll say it formally. I hope you're recovering from the shingles, and that it's going smoothly. But I first came across your work in reading. I went on this deep dive. I'm training for a sub 3 hour marathon. I have background in running over the last few years, and so I went to this deep dive of Michael Jordan, The Last Dance, and Kobe Bryant, and Phil Jackson's book, Tim Grover's book, and your name keeps popping up, keep popping up. And so, mindfulness, I'm a big fan of stoicism. I'm a big fan of presence awareness, stress management. I teach about these things. I write about these things. I read about these things. I geek out on these things. I love it. And so I missed my last attempt by 39 seconds. And it was a massive hit to the ego. And so now I'm going at my second attempt. And it's been very tough for me mentally to lean into, I'm getting up, I'm doing the work, and I know you're very big on pure performance and falling in love with the process and embracing the process. And so, one of my favorite definitions of mental toughness and mental strength is about how fast you can bring yourself back to center, aligned with Phil Jackson's work, something that I know you aligned with him on. When it comes to bringing yourself back to center, when it comes to handling the discomfort, the dis-ease, as you referred to it, how can people get comfortable sitting in tension?
Interesting question. How do you get comfortable with it? You have to, like I said, you have to accept it. It's uncomfortable. So one of the books that I read in my recovery 41 years ago is called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for 10 years. And how does he start off the book? He starts off the book, Problems and Pain. Life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. It means we get beyond it. Transformation allows us to let it go and to move on. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. So I say no struggle, no swag, no pressure, no diamonds. That's the thing. So you say yes to it, and it's because it's uncomfortable. You have to reprogram the nervous system because the nervous system doesn't discriminate. If it's pleasant, it approaches. If it's unpleasant, we have aversion or we avoid it. And if it's neither pleasant or unpleasant and we don't have any dog in that fight, we have indifference, then we space out. So we have to train ourselves to say yes, to be present, to be in the eye of the storm and not be in the storm. But notice you can be the eye in the storm and observe the storm without being the storm. And so when we have this discomfort, when we have this pain, whether it's nerve pain or whatever it is, we need to be able to see it as an experience we're having. It's not who we are, but we get identified with it. And that's the challenge because we're trying to get rid of it. The more you get rid of it, the more it stays around. It's like we have Velcro and just attached to it. You're attached to it. You're pushing it away or pulling it towards you, you're attached. The idea is just to not be attached. Just let it go. If you let it go, there's a possibility of just changing like everything else, just floating away. So any emotion we have, it's the same thing, is to be experienced, recognized, and experienced, and let go of. But that's what it comes down to. Now, how long does it take before it goes away? That depends on the conditions. But we have to train ourselves to say, okay, so if this, oh, I know some people have experienced the symptoms that I'm going through for 5 weeks, maybe longer. Sometimes it could become a chronic illness. But the idea is you can handle it a moment at a time. Just this minute, then this minute, then this minute. And then of course you get frustrated, you get upset, you can throw up your hands, holler, whatever you want, then let it go, then reset, okay, do it again, do it again, do it again. So that's what a discipline that Scott Peck talked about. The discipline, the delaying gratification, especially instant gratification, assumption of personal responsibility. Yes, I don't know. I can't control what happens to me, but I always have a choice of how I respond to it or react to it. If I react to it, no space, I'm just reacting, I'm a victim. I'm a victim of circumstance. If I create space and say, okay, how do I want to be? What qualities, what attitude do I want to experience in that thing? And so this idea of delaying gratification, especially instant gratification, assumption of personal responsibility. And he also talks about this idea of commitment to the truth, to north. And so this is the discipline we have to do. And then bracketing. Sometimes I have to bracket my attitude or my personality or my thoughts about things, just bracket them. Like this, just take it, set it over here. Because we have this ability to set self aside or set things aside and just observe experience uncritically and without judging, just noticing it as a passing phenomena and not getting identified with it, but embracing it, saying yes to it, experiencing it, and then letting it go. That sounds a lot, it's very easy. It's challenging to do, but we can program ourselves to do that.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode. There's a couple things that I want to touch on that you talked about. I think something I don't want to miss, though, is how do you know that you got to reset every minute, right? Like you were talking about, especially when you're dealing with that tension. I definitely relate to that because when I have to go like a step at a time, a mile at a time, no matter how far I'm going, it's that constant, like we were saying, getting comfortable sitting in tension. But how do you know when you're just like beating yourself over the head, conditioning yourself to stay in circumstances that you should not be accepting versus sitting in the tension because it's healthy to cultivate the discipline. Does that make sense?
Well, it's ignorance, and it's not seeing clearly that the more I hold on to something, the more the more it hurts. You know, they have this. I've heard that this is how they catch monkeys. They have a little hole, and the monkey could put his hand, his part through the hole, and then there's a banana. So he grabs the banana and try to pull the banana out, and that's how he gets stuck. If he let go of the banana, he can pull his hand out. But you're hungry, and that banana is really good, awfully good, and you don't want to let it go. That's what it is. So if you can see, oh, that attachment is causing me suffering, then once I learn how to let it go, and once I understand it, oh, now I get it. But you may have to go through that thousands of millions of times before the light bulb goes off and says, oh, I can let go. I can let it be. And then the funny thing about it is that's not the only banana in the world. But it's in front of you, and you think it is. Where in actuality, you let go of it, you might have access. Oh, there's a tree over there. There's a whole bunch of bananas. I can get those. You see what I'm saying? So this is the wisdom part, the understanding part of seeing, and this is what makes it challenging. We have to we have to get intimate with the suffering. We have to see how we suffer. And if we see how we suffer, then we can go beyond the suffering. So some of the suffering is just going to happen. I know I've heard in recovery that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So there's the hit of the actual pain of the experience. Then there's the second pain with the anguish and our mental anguish about awfulizing and trying to and being identified with the pain and keep mentioning it, pain. Even the word pain, it creates a certain thing. You say, okay, it's unpleasant, or it's just it's a tension, and you get it on a bare awareness level. Okay, so I'm feeling anxiety, this tightness here. If I can just be with the tightness and just breathe with it, now I'm not in the story about it and creating more suffering. I just notice, oh, it's just a sensation that comes and goes.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, but the next place I want to take things is, how do you define mental strength, mental toughness, mental fitness, mental resilience? How would you define those?
A friend of mine, I met him when I went to English. He wrote a book called Focus for Soccer. And his definition of mental toughness is to physically do what you mentally commit to. Mental toughness is being able to say yes to the challenges, the difficulty, and embrace it, and generate the hope and make wise choices. Always look at, okay, how did I choose? And then when you make mistakes, you can learn from it. But you're going to make mistakes. We learn trial and error. So I believe I mentioned in my book, The Mindful Athlete, a success is 99% failure. So MJ talks about missing 26 game-winning shots and how many shots and all of that. But because he failed, that's how he succeeds. And there's people going way back. Winston Churchill. His definition of success is going from failure to failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. So that's it. So if you're not failing and if you're not uncomfortable, you ain't learning and you ain't transforming.
How would you look at your time with the Lakers and with the Bulls in shaping your perspective and perception of mental toughness? And I want to back up and just add a bit more context. As much as we look at championship teams and see the success of those teams in terms of associating the actual outcome with the culture and the dynamic and the effort that goes into it, if you look at the documentaries, if you look at the books, if you look at the testimonials of the people that went through it, there's a lot of chaos that ensues over the course of the season. So I think that narrative gets lost in the journey of what it takes to become that champion. People just kind of remember like all of the wins, and they don't necessarily see all of the chaos that happens behind closed doors. How did working with those teams help shape your perspective and perception around championship level winning?
Yes, well, it's my own experience, but interesting. My roommate from college, Dr. J. Julius Irving. I remember because he came out of New York and he went to UMass, University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and people would say to him, "Oh, what's it feel like to be an overnight success?" And you know what his comment was? It's taken me my whole life to become an overnight success. And that's it. People think this instant, like Instagram, instant gratification. No, it takes a lot of work. Thousands of hours, a lot of work, a lot of overcoming adversity. You know, you think of Michael Jordan and you look at this elite athlete, like just, you know, mental toughness, the desire to win, huge. Well, he got cut from his high school basketball team. So something happened, and then he interpreted a certain way. So by the time I saw him in the 90s when I was working with the Bulls, he acted like he was still trying to make the team. So no one was going to outwork him. He was always working harder than everybody else and dominating. So that's how he interpreted losing or not being chosen. So we all could do that. I think of people don't realize, Phil Jackson's a Hall of Fame basketball coach, but he was a high flying basketball player. Played for the New York Knicks, and in his second year, he had a spinal fusion, so he couldn't play for over a year. So back in those days, they only had one coach, Red Holzman, and Red Holzman knew that he had to keep Phil engaged. If he can't actually get out there for a year, how does he keep him engaged? Well, he made him an assistant coach. Then he had to stay in the game and do coaching. Now, that devastating activity ended his days of being a high flyer. He still played, but he wasn't the athlete that he was before that. But yet that ended up helping him. That adversity, what he learned from that, catapulted him into a Hall of Fame basketball coach. So we don't look at failure, we don't look at difficulty that way. We just look at the what works and the success. We don't look at what's behind or that there's some adversity or some struggle. Like I said, no struggle, no swag, no pressure, no diamonds. Pressure is a privilege. That's what Doc Rivers says. That's what he said. I heard him say that. Pressure is a privilege. And so that's why I'm saying embracing it, because the very thing that you see as a roadblock could be a stepping stone to your greatness. And Hans Selye, the guy that talks about, they call him Selye or Selye. I pronounce it Selye. He said, the stress of life, he says, when we get hit with with the adversity, that it helps us to express our latent abilities. We need to struggle. Once again, you're a chrysalis. You're in a chrysalis, a caterpillar. If you don't struggle, you won't fly. And there's a story about a young man getting a chrysalis and watching the little being trying to get out. So he helped it. And so by helping it, by the time the being got out, it was ill-formed and it fell. It couldn't fly. So we got to be careful. And I think it was, I don't know which philosopher, he said, may you encounter difficulty. Because the difficulty is the baptism in the fire. That's the thing that molds us, that allows our latent abilities to express themselves. Because without being challenged, then you wouldn't go beyond the norm.
What do you think? What attribute, what quality, what is it that you think helps? I remember you also mentioned this in your book about as the game grew tenser, player like MJ, Kobe, they actually grew calmer.
Yeah.
What did they do to help cultivate that sense of calm when there's so much tension around them?
They say yes to it and embrace it, but the confidence comes from the preparation, the putting in the work. Let's talk about Kobe when he played in it's I think it might have I believe it was his first playoff series. I think he shot 2 or 3 air balls, maybe even 4. So how did he respond to that? Much like MJ. So he gets back there, Newport Beach, and he calls the custodian. Only Kobe would have the custodian's number. Calls the custodian, tells him to open up the gym, and I think he shot somewhere like 5 or 8 hours, just shooting, just shooting, just shooting. So he saw that as, what do I need to learn? What do I need to practice to do what I need to do? And I love the game, and I have I have enough courage to go beyond the fear of anything, and then you put in the time, you do the work. That's what it takes. It takes somebody like him. When he won, I believe it was 2009. I'm not sure the exact year, but he won his team won the NBA championship, and he gave himself 2 weeks, and then he went down to Houston to work with Elijah on his post game. See, that's what these guys are doing. Larry Bird, Dr. J, all of these guys, they're always looking to get better. They're always putting in the time so that, you're going to be confident. And they know that the sprints I run now are going to show up in June when I have a double overtime in the finals. It's going to show up. So it's the effort, the effort, volitional effort is the effort of attention, what you pay attention to, what you nurture. And that's what it comes down to, is the people are unlocked because they have this ability to have what we call cognitive dissonance, or to get comfortable being uncomfortable. But there's also a pursuit of excellence. That's one of the games I'm playing. I'm pursuing excellence and wisdom with grace and ease. So I teach it, and that's how you learn about it. You want to learn something, you teach it. If you want to keep something, you give it away. So I've been doing this for many decades now. Most of my life are pursuing excellence and wisdom with grace and ease. Understanding, how do you do that? And how do you say yes to life when it's challenging? And that's where the benefit comes from. More comes from the mistakes. You learn more from the mistakes than you do by not making mistakes. You learn more about falling down, how to get up. But I said, how do you do it? Well, Winston Churchill said, you don't lose enthusiasm. You become a learner. And when you learn and achieve, you generate this energizing enthusiasm. That's how I've been doing it. I'm still learning and evolving. It doesn't matter. So I've worked with Chicago Bulls in the 90s, and the Lakers, 2000, 2010 around that time. And then last year I was working with the Edmonton Oilers, and another finals, maybe my 10th or 11th finals, I can't remember. But it's the same drill. It's how you help people be who they are. So the adversity, being in last place, and then not only going to the finals, but being down 0-3, first team in 81 years, to force a game 7, and we came this close to a goal away from potentially coming back all the way. And so it's embracing the adversity, all the things we're talking about. You do that, and collectively and individually, you have to do that. You have to be able to say yes to it, and then ask yourself, what's the lesson, the growth mindset? Okay, this is the roadblock, but it's a stepping stone, really. It's how you interpret things. And here's how crazy this is, Jonathan. 90%, well, one thing you got to understand is, the research says you're happy first, then you're successful. We have this idea, if I win a championship, or if I have a great podcast, or if I have, if I ask all the questions, then I'm going to be happy. No, you're happy first, then the success comes. And the idea is this idea that Earl Nightingale learned from him. He said, success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So every day you can succeed. Every day, 1% better, 1% better. That's all you need to do. And then at some point, it's gonna take off. So this idea that happiness, 90% of our long-term happiness is predicated on our interpretive styles, how we interpret our experience. Not 10%, 90%. So with MJ, you get cut from the high school basketball team, and you say, okay, coach says, okay, you want to work? You got to work on it. What do you want to do? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I want to put more work in, and I'm going to get better. What do I need to learn and practice? What's the lesson here? You learn the lesson, and it takes you to the next level. It takes you to where you need to go. But that's it. It's that discipline that Scott Peck talked about, delaying gratification. So these guys are instead of going out, hanging out at a strip mall, or seeing movies, or watching Netflix, they're in the gym, or they're focusing on their mental game. They're working on their game. Tom Brady, you don't realize he ended up better than he was when he first came in the league, but he's spending 10, 11, 12 hours a day in the off season working on his craft. That's what it takes. People don't see that. They see, okay, I want that, but I don't want that. People say to me, oh, I want to be like Mike, or I want to be like Kobe. I say, okay, here's what it takes. Well, I didn't sign up for that. That's too painful. I don't have that commitment to excellence. I'm not willing to pay the price, but you got to pay the price. No struggle, no swag.
We hear a lot about the stories in that journey, like I was referring to before. And we know all the accolades. I think what we don't hear enough about is the kinds of questions that these individuals ask. A Phil Jackson, a Kobe, Edmonton Oilers. What kinds of questions did they ask you to help guide them towards what they were ultimately able to achieve? Like, how are they thinking?
How? How questions? How do you do it? And then some of the why questions. Why do I want to do it? They're having the want to, right? But it's called neurolinguistic programming. And they talk about that. Ask the why questions will give you a certain analysis of what's wrong, but the how questions is what gets you to actually do it. So asking questions, how do I do it? Not can I do it, but how do I do it? And they don't say how long or let them know. They know that old saying that spiritual saying that says 70 times 70. You do it 70 times 70. But it's not a number. It's until you can do it. It's a metaphor for 70 times 70. You do it until you can do it. And so you don't quit, you don't give up, you keep doing it and you keep learning and practicing until you can do it. So people want a formula from me. And I say to them, the formula is there's no formula. You got to read the situation and then act, you know, whatever the situation that calls for, you got to do it. You got to be willing to say yes to it.
When you look back on your experience, having worked with all of these winners, being one yourself, how do you think that helps forge someone's identity when they no longer have that same extrinsic tool to help them become something that's worthy of other people's attention, right? Like, I think what I'm really trying to ask is a lot of people struggle with their identity because they tether their outcomes to who they are. How do you make that shift to living more from an intrinsic level of love, experiencing courage, and trying to find that wisdom?
So I heard this from this gentleman, Brian Tracy, but I think it goes back before him. You are not what you think you are, but what you think you are.
I have to like sit with that. I haven't wrapped my head around it yet.
You are not what you think you are, but what you think you are. So I have an idea about who I am, and I'm conscious of that. But there's an unconscious conversation going on that has my secret self, that how I really feel about who I am. And that's the thinking you got to listen to, because you become what you think about. The strangest secret, Earl Nightingale again. He said that, we become, and I think Emerson said, we become what we think about all day long. So if you see yourself, it's about making a transformation from doing to being. So if you want a championship, you got to be a champion. So what does that mean? You got to think, feel, and behave, and act like a champion. Do the thing, and you will have the power. Emerson. So you have to act as if, not fake it till you make it, because faking it knows that you're not being authentic and it's not real. But act as if. So if you want to be a champion, so if you look at somebody like a Kobe on a Michael, of course you're not going to be like them. But what are the characteristics? How do they think? How do they feel? This is what Einstein said. He wants to know how God thinks. You get what I'm saying? And so but you have to have this ability, like I talked about, to believe. And this is what I believe. We all have masterpieces. I'm looking at you, I'm looking at myself. We're caterpillars in the chrysalis. Everybody's a caterpillar. And the question is, and no one can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. I can help you. I can give you some ideas, some lessons, but you have to do it. But you have to break out. But everybody's a bad mofo. Everybody's a masterpiece. Everybody has divine spark, Christ consciousness, Kuan Yin energy, whatever you want to call it. But we have it. And according to Martin Buber, we have a divine spark that's encrusted in the shell, and we have a system of hideouts. We hide from ourselves. There's this, he talks about this idea that that Adam is walking in the Garden of Eden, and God says, Adam, wherefore art thou? Well, he's not asking Adam where he is physically. He knows where he is. Physically, he's saying, well, I've allotted 36 years to you. What have you done with your life? How are you using that God-given talent that I gave you? Your masterpiece within, that divine spark. So we're all trying to get out of that encrusted shell, break out, call it chrysalis, whatever you want. But we all have the same ability, whether we embrace it and accept it and work to unlock ourselves to release that divine spark. That's something else. So I don't fix anybody. I just help people break out of the chrysalis. Michelangelo, when they say, how do you create these masterpieces out of the block of marble? And he says, all I do is chip away to get them to release the masterpiece that's already there. That's the work. But if you don't see yourself as a masterpiece, then whatever you think, that's what it is. If you think you're good for nothing, and Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking, he said, if I used to walk around feeling like I was a worm and a nobody, and everybody responded in kind. So this self-identity, and here's the thing, maybe I'll leave you with this. I think it was Buttersworth, was it the theologian? He said, we are not fixed points. We are ever-changing events. So now you can see where the challenge is, because we think we're fixed points, or we're this or that, or I'm a basketball player, or I'm a school teacher, or I'm a meditator, or I'm a mindfulness expert. All of those things, those are just titles. That's not who we are. And so you have to keep reinventing yourself. That's a lifelong process. Know yourself. You got to keep knowing yourself, because you change and things change. So you have to keep the inquiry. Am I being honest with myself? Am I seeing things clearly? Am I challenging my assumptions about things? It's a lot of work. But if you love yourself and you want yourself to grow, then you will use that love to find the effort to do the work. And if you're afraid of failure or success, then you will use the courage it takes to go beyond the fear.
George, I have one more question for you that I ask all the guests on the podcast, and I'm not going to pose it to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
Authenticity is more important than winning. And just be in the eye of the hurricane, be yourself, be like water.
Thank you so much for doing this. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Yes, go to my website, georgemumford.com. And if you want to just communicate and get some information, you can email connect@georgemumford.com. And I got a YouTube channel. And if you just Google my name, all kinds of stuff will come up. But yeah, that's how they can get in touch with me. And of course, I have the Mindful Athlete Secrets to Pure Performance. This came out 10 years ago, and then Unlocked, Embrace Your Greatness, Find the Flow, Discover Success. That came out, I want to say 2 years ago, 2013, 2023. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff out there. And then like podcasts like this.
George, thank you so much. You're a legend. I'm grateful for your work. I'm grateful for your time. If you got any value out of this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Once again, my name is John Cohn, and this is Inside the Inspired.